In this video, we're going to be talking about the structure of atoms, which are the smallest fundamental unit that make up every element of matter. In previous videos, we learned that elements are the simplest form of matter because when they are broken down into their atoms, they cannot be broken down into smaller units. In fact, the word atom, which is derived from a Greek word atomos, literally means indivisible. Now, this term is a little bit misleading because atoms actually have three different separate parts to them. However, if we break an atom down into these three separate parts, each of these three separate parts are not able to exist by themselves. And for that reason, we consider atoms the smallest fundamental unit of matter. When we represent atoms with this diagram here, we are using what we call the Bohr model or a Bohr diagram to represent an atom, named after the Danish physicist who first codified this model. So we start by looking here in the center of an atom with this structure, which is what we call a nucleus. Now, a nucleus, as you can see from the letters inside, actually has two different parts, which we call subatomic particles. A particle is just a fancy word referring to a small piece of matter, and subatomic literally meaning that it is smaller than an atom. So the P plus that we see here refers to a subatomic particle called a proton, which has a +1 charge and an atomic mass, which again is simply a measurement that tells us how heavy the substance is. So the atomic mass of a proton is defined as 1. The N with a degree sign or 0 next to it refers to a neutron, which has a charge of 0 and an atomic mass of 1. So the names proton and neutron are not accidental because anything that doesn't have charge is defined as neutral, hence the word neutron. And because protons have a +1 charge, you can kind of remember that it has a positive charge by the fact that it starts with a P. Now, if we go outside the nucleus to these ring structures that we find, these little dots surrounding the nucleus are what we call electrons, which are defined as having a -1 charge and a mass of 0. Now, the mass of an electron is not exactly 0, but electrons are so small that their mass has basically been defined as so close to 0 that it doesn't impact the mass of the atom overall. Now, electrons are not found in the nucleus. Instead, they travel outside of the nucleus in these little ring structures, which are given two names, and you'll learn about these in more detail in higher grades. Sometimes these rings are what we call orbitals, although more commonly in Science 10, they are simply called shells, and the electrons move in these shells around the nucleus. Now, the most important of the electron shells is this shell, which we can recognize because it is the outermost shell. It's the shell that is farthest away from the nucleus, so its electrons are farthest away from the nucleus. And it is given the special name of the valence shell. And the valence shell and all the electrons within the valence shell are very important in terms of understanding the behavior of atoms. In the next video, we'll take our knowledge of the structure of the atom and look at how the atoms are organized on the periodic table of the elements.